What is the KinderSmile Foundation?
So KinderSmile Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we advocate for children and families here in marginalized communities. Our mission is to increase oral health care access, and we focus on children and perinatal mothers. And our vision is to see a world where oral disease is eradicated, because oral disease is the #1 preventable disease. And we want to make sure that all of our children in marginalized and rural communities have access to comprehensive oral health care.
And that's a wonderful thing that you do. I guess the service is definitely needed. What made you start this foundation and this whole operation of providing oral health care?
Well, Mary, this journey, I call it, started in 2007. The first 15 years of my career as a dentist, I was in private practice. I was a private practitioner, practicing dentistry in Montclair, New Jersey. Everyone's familiar with Montclair, New Jersey, income per capita, and so forth. First 15 years, I wasn't very happy as a dentist, believe it or not. I checked all of the boxes of being a Black health professional, and that wasn't enough. There was something in my soul that was missing. And I realized that there's a difference with providing a service and serving your community. And what I was doing as a private practitioner was providing a service. That's what we do as dentists. But that wasn't enough. And so what I decided to do, I decided to become a program dentist at the local Head Start, Montclair Child Development in Montclair. And my Wednesdays off, I would go there and I would provide oral education to the children, the teachers, and the parents. And it was wonderful. My soul was starting to fill because I realized that oral education is so needed. You know, we need to meet our children and families where they are and really explain why oral hygiene is so very important, because as I mentioned before, oral disease is the #1 preventable disease. So every Wednesday when I would do this, I realized and I saw children when I was down on their level with mutilated dentition or black teeth or broken teeth. And I'm scratching my head because I did not grow up in New Jersey, Montclair, New Jersey. I did not, you know? And so I found out that in Montclair, there's an area in Montclair, the 4th Ward. And the Head Start program service or educate children at or below poverty level. And so that made sense why I was seeing these children with mutilated dentition. So I went to the executive director and I said, you know what? I want to do a little more than just oral education. If you can get permission or consent from the parents to have children who are in need of access to care bused to my private office, which was less than a mile away, I will do these services free of charge. And so that's what I did. And children were being bused to my office, consent form, free of charge. No cleanings, fillings, extractions, everything that they needed. So that was going well. And I realized my soul was being filled. I realized now I'm providing service for a community that's in such need. So then one Wednesday, later on in the evening, I get a phone call from my receptionist. She said, we have a little girl here. And I said, but I'm off today. And she was like, well, she says she knows you. And so we went through the charts, and she wasn't a patient of ours. She was from a local Head Start. Long story short, my home in Montclair was in close proximity to my office, so I stopped what I was doing and I went there, and here was a little 5-year-old girl. When I saw her, Mary, she had an abscess the size of a golf ball. Literally. But she was asymptomatic, meaning she wasn't experiencing any pain. So she leaped into my arms and she was so excited to see me. And I felt this pit in my stomach. Here I am leaving my son, who's almost the same age as little Z, we'll call her. And I brought her into the operatory, and I spoke to the grandaunt, and I said, this is pretty deadly infection. How long has she had this? And she said 3 months. And I said, why didn't she go to a dentist? And she said, well, we live in Union County, and we could not find a dentist to accept her Medicaid insurance. And I said, okay, she's got to be on antibiotics. And unfortunately, this tooth has to be extracted. Do you have funds to fill the prescription? She said yes. And I said, she has to be back in 10 days. And I said, if you don't come back, I'm going to come knocking on your door. So I go home that night, and I literally could not sleep. I tossed and I turned. And I tell this story just like it all the time. I fell to my knees, and I had a long conversation with God, and I said, what am I doing? And that night, KinderSmile Foundation was born. And I felt compelled to be the voice and the advocate, because the grandaunt didn't know how to advocate. This little girl was walking around with an abscess the size of a golf ball, expecting to learn in school, expecting to eat, expecting to carry on her life as a 5-year-old, but had this oral health impediment, that could potentially kill her. Mm-hmm. So the next morning, I said to myself, all right, Nicole, are you doing this because you're led to do this and there's a need? Why are you doing? I was questioning myself, because once again, I was a private practitioner. I had my own practice. I had 3 kids, mom, I'm married, and all of this, and yet and I said, I need confirmation that this is what I'm supposed to do. And literally lunchtime the next morning, my assistant walked in with the quarterly American Dental Association newsletter. And on the front cover, Mary, was a 12-year-old Diamante driver, a Black boy from Prince George's County, Maryland.
I remember that story.
Who died from that same infection. And that's when it was confirmed that this is the journey that I need to take. So here we are, almost 20 years later.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Thank God you took that story.
Yeah.
Right? Literally. Literally.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. To me, it's so amazing, because I have seen young children now. As you know, we're both involved in certain organizations that talk about oral health.
Absolutely.
Anyway, you do the practice. I have been at meetings where they talk about it. And it was always amazing to me how young children really need the oral health care. Yet when I was growing up, you didn't go to the dentist till you were in kindergarten, first grade, right? Why is it that young kids need to see the dentist?
Oral health is the gateway to total health. And if you want to prevent oral disease, the younger, the better. And probably when you and I were growing up, there was fluoride in the water. There's fluoridated water. Now things have changed drastically. And just the foods, the overabundance of the processed foods that break down the enamel and cause tooth decay. So very important. According to the American Dental Association, children should be seen by a dentist by age 1. But in our dental homes, we implore that the mothers or the families bring their children in when they see the first tooth erupting, for a plethora of reasons. Number 1, it's getting the child familiar with the dental environment. And we do a lap visit. So that's number 1. And just habitual, that is habit. And when we talk about children and families in marginalized communities, we have to take into consideration the educational level, the comprehension. We deal with undocumented and immigrants, and we want to meet them where they are. We don't want to talk down to them. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable if, they haven't brought their child into the dentist. So very important that we encourage them. The minute you see a tooth erupting, bring your child in. Bring the child in. Very important.
But what are you going to see when there's just a little bit of a tooth popping out?
Great question. Very good question. So your body makes plaque. So from breastfeeding to drinking formula to feeding a child, all of that, the plaque that's built up, you have bacteria. And if the parent isn't providing proper oral hygiene instruction, that plaque, those processed food even from the breast milk, can break down that enamel and expose that child at a very young age to cavities. And we've seen it. We've seen children under a year with 8 teeth, and they have decay because the parents aren't understanding the precautions or the measures to take to prevent that. They think that, oh, they don't have a full complement of teeth. I'm breastfeeding. Oh, that's okay. You still have to implement good oral hygiene habits at a very young age, even if it's that one tooth or even if it's a tooth that's partially erupted.
So I always hear people saying, what does it matter? You're going to lose your baby teeth anyway, right? And I'm sure you're going to disagree. It does matter. Why does it matter?
Oh, it absolutely matters, 100%. We get 2 sets of teeth. So the primary teeth or the deciduous or baby teeth are crucially important. How will our children speak if they don't have teeth? How will they masticate or eat food if they don't have a healthy complement of teeth? So a quick story. When we started out with the journey with KinderSmile Foundation, Montclair Childdevelopment Head Start was our first school where we would provide oral education. And now, instead of the children being bused to the dental home, we would go on the premises of the school, provide education and preventative and diagnostic services. There was a 2-year-old boy who had a full complement of teeth, 20 teeth, baby teeth, right? At 2 years old, they should have 20 teeth. He had his 20 teeth. Out of the 20 teeth, 18 of them had cavities. So tell me, how is he eating properly if he's experiencing pain? How is he articulating to his parents that he's in pain?
Well, he might not even realize it's not what he should be feeling, right?
Absolutely.
Because he doesn't know anything different.
He doesn't know anything different. But so he's living with that discomfort. So what we had to do, we had to do serious comprehensive services and extract his top 6 teeth, his anterior teeth. Now, each tooth has a purpose in your mouth. The anterior teeth incise the food. They hear the food. And the molars and the premolars in the back masticate and chew the food so that we can digest it properly. So we had to extract 4 of his anterior teeth. He's 2 years old. We extract those teeth, and then he is now a year later, 2 years later, in a speech impediment class. A speech specialist is now coming to the school to help him with his speech. So I say to the teacher, why is little Jay in that class? They said, well, he's having problems enunciating and pronunciating. I said, he doesn't have a speech impediment. He has his anterior teeth were extracted. Those are the teeth that are needed for the tongue to go on the backs of the teeth so they can start enunciating and pronunciating.
So it was causing him a problem.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's what happens in our marginalized communities. They're displaced and they're tracked. So that's why it's so important to educate on oral health, oral hygiene, to understand, let the teachers and the caregivers know, if you extract these teeth, he's going to have a problem. He's going to have problems speaking. There's nothing wrong. His permanent teeth will come in and he'll be able to speak and, but there's not a problem. So that's why deciduous or baby teeth are crucially important. Very, very important.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out the full conversation by clicking the link in the top right corner or the link in the description. And be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you enjoyed the video and want to be updated when our new interviews are released.